hack-and-slash genre returns to the PSP with Sony Online's Untold Legends: The Warrior's Code. While the game provides everything you could want from an action RPG, it doesn't really break any new ground. Because of that, it ends up delivering a pretty average experience. Warrior's Code does try to put its own stamp on combat. You can switch between a melee and projectile weapon, although you'll probably discover early on that the projectile weapon is useless because of how hard it is to aim. Also, when you build up enough essence, you can transform into a powerful changeling beast, which can make fighting large groups of enemies easier, but not enough to force yourself to change that often. Finally, Sony Online added an interesting opportunity attack, which can be used before or after an enemy launches a special attack. An orange ring appears around them, indicating that they're vulnerable to one of these attacks. Unfortunately, none of these improvements changes the fact that your main attacks are centralized around only one button, which pretty much limits any kind of variety. And although it's a staple of hack-and-slash games to have such simplistic combat, it doesn't keep it from getting repetitive.
Oh, and don't expect me to fight or anything.
Of course, there's no denying the certain level of addiction that lies in continually leveling up a character, especially one that you can customize, and seeing what new armor and attacks you can unlock. And it's a definite improvement that you can have 6 active spells, as opposed to the 2 that were available in the first Untold Legends. But after just a few hours of level progression, you might realize that you're essentially doing the same thing over and over again, casting a spell and then hitting the X button a bunch of times. It also doesn't help that the enemies you fight level up at the same rate you do. So despite the fact that your attacks become stronger, it'll still take the same amount of hits to drop an enemy. All this only drives home the monotonous nature of the gameplay. Coincidentally, Warrior's Code shares some story elements with Elder Scrolls 4. The king is dead and his illegitimate son, who has been kept secret and safe, must take his rightful place on the throne. But none of that really matters since your character is basically just given orders to go slaughter evil creatures.
Destroy their supplies and whatever troops you encounter.
The plot doesn't do anything new and seems pretty inconsequential since 98% of the game is running and fighting. It's easy to see where Sony Online was trying to go with the design of Warrior's Code. In an attempt to separate themselves from other games in the genre, the developers gave all the characters and weapons an exaggerated look. While commendable, it all ends up looking kinda ridiculous. It also makes things a little confusing in combat, since both you and your foes sport a large amount of pokey nubs and gigantic weaponry. Also, many enemies don't seem to fit the world at all. Some have bear traps for hands, or look like Beetle Bailey crossed with a potato. There also isn't that much variation in the enemies except for palette swaps, and some bosses just look like larger versions of their grunts. The maps also lack variety. A level named Siege Factory still takes place outside in the snow, and several tombs and temples look exactly the same. If you're used to the formula of your typical overhead action adventure and still have fun with the genre, then there's no reason not to go pick up Warrior's Code. Its minor additions to the combat mechanics should provide enough to keep your interest. But if you bore easily, or you're looking for something completely different, then Warrior's Code isn't for you.
We need all the help we can get!